You've got this silent, unsung hero inside you, a guardian that's protecting your body's most critical asset 24/7. We're talking about the blood-brain barrier, and honestly, understanding it might just change the way you think about your health. So let's dive right in.
Have you ever had one of those days, or maybe weeks, where you're just struggling with brain fog, or this deep fatigue that no amount of sleep seems to fix? It's so common, right? But what if the root cause isn't some big mystery, but a very specific physical barrier that's been, well, let's say, compromised?
So let's get properly introduced to this gatekeeper. We're going to explore what it is, exactly how it works, and you'll see why its health is absolutely vital for your own. Okay, here's the official science-y definition. It sounds pretty complex, right? It talks about solutes, which are really just particles floating around in your blood. But the key phrase I want you to focus on is highly selective. This thing isn't just a wall. It's a super sophisticated security system. Its whole job is to let the good stuff in and keep the bad stuff out. Here's a much better way to think about it. Imagine your bloodstream is like a massive, crowded street city. Your brain? That's the super exclusive VIP club. And the blood-brain barrier, well, that's the bouncer at the front door, and he is meticulously checking the guest list. So the biggest takeaway here is to get rid of that image of a solid brick wall. It's not that at all. It's a dynamic, intelligent filter. It's smart. It's actively pulling in crucial nutrients like glucose and oxygen to power your brain, while at the same time blocking things like bacteria and viruses from just waltzing in and causing a whole lot of trouble. So how does this bouncer actually do its job? Well, the secret is in something called tight junctions. Think of these like molecular gates or super strong seals between the cells that make up the barrier. When they're strong and tight, everything's secure. But when they start to get weak, well, that's when the problems really begin. And this weakening leads to what scientists and researchers are calling the leaky brain problem. And this is where our whole story takes a really critical turn. So the issue at its core is that these tight junctions can actually loosen up. The barrier becomes more porous or leaky. And what that means is that unwanted things from your blood can now slip right past security and get into the incredibly sensitive environment of your brain and central nervous system. So think about it. What happens when that bouncer gets overwhelmed or maybe just distracted for a second? When the guest list is totally ignored and all the troublemakers get into the VIP club, the result is chaos, right? It's inflammation and disruption, and that can show up in some really surprising ways. So the next logical question is, what causes this breakdown in security in the first place? Well, the triggers are surprisingly common, and I'd be willing to bet some of them are part of your daily life right now. And this brings us to a really profound connection. The research is becoming incredibly clear on this. The path to a leaky brain almost always begins with a leaky gut. It turns out the barriers in both your gut and your brain are built in a surprisingly similar way. The health of one is directly tied to the health of the other. Here's a fascinating concrete example of how this works. A Harvard study found that a protein in wheat called gliadin, well, when you eat it, it triggers the release of another protein called zonulin. And what's zonulin's job? It's basically like a master key that can unlock those tight junctions. Not just in the gut, but in the brain too, making both of them more permeable. But it's not just about one food, of course. Our whole modern lifestyle can be a huge factor. Things like chronic stress, a messed up sleep schedule, certain diets high in fat and calories, and too much alcohol. They all put this constant pressure on that barrier, slowly wearing down its defenses. Then you have our exposure to things in the environment. Things like bacterial infections, toxins from mold, heavy metals, and even just having an imbalance of bacteria in our gut. That's a condition called dysbiosis. All of these can trigger the kind of inflammation that compromises the barrier. And finally, the research clearly links a bunch of other medical conditions to a weakened barrier. Things like autoimmune diseases, problems with the liver, high blood sugar from diabetes, and even physical head trauma can all have a direct negative impact on its integrity. Okay, so we've seen all the triggers. Now let's circle all the way back to where we started and really connect the dots. What does a leaky blood-brain barrier actually feel like? For a lot of people, this is the first thing they notice. That frustrating brain fog, finding it hard to concentrate, maybe some memory lapses. The research points to a very clear cause for this: low-grade inflammation in the brain, which happens when that barrier is compromised. But the impact isn't just cognitive. It can be profoundly physical. We're talking about that kind of chronic fatigue that sleep just doesn't touch, sudden and severe headaches, and even more serious neurological issues. These are all listed as potential signs that the brain's protective systems are really under strain.
And this might be the most crucial insight of all. The research is showing a powerful link between a leaky blood-brain barrier and conditions like anxiety, depression, and even ADHD. This is a total game changer because it suggests there's a physical, inflammatory component to challenges that have often been treated as purely psychological.
Okay, after covering all those problems, I know it can sound a little discouraging, but now it's time to shift to the solutions. Because here's the really good news. This barrier isn't static. We can absolutely take steps to support and strengthen our brain's defenses.
So the path forward is actually pretty clear. It's really about reducing the very triggers we just talked about, things like stress, poor sleep, and inflammatory foods, while at the same time actively supporting the systems that protect our brain, especially our gut health. It's a two-pronged approach. Take out the bad stuff and put in more of the good stuff.
When you get right down to it, your brain's personal bodyguard is shaped by the small choices you make every single day. By supporting your gut, by managing your stress, by prioritizing sleep, you're not just feeling better in the moment, you're actively strengthening your most important defense. So the question is, what's one choice you'll make for your brain's health today? Thanks for joining me.